Waiting. Okay. All right. So, what we were doing last week was learning this very in-depth tshuva from Rav Sharaga, very some uncharacteristic of what we've seen in the past, where in the past he's just written a couple of pages. Here he's got several pages on this very singular idea that when someone is acting as a shaliach in order to make a profit, and in the course of his doing the business that he's been dispatched to do, he earns more. He gets more as a gift from the person with whom he's interacting. Okay, so the classic case is that I'm sent as a buyer for a company, and I go ahead and as a result of buying the product, the seller gives me an additional gift. Who has what is who gets that gift? So Rav Sharaga is leaning towards the fact that they should split it. Dispatcher, the principal, and the agent. The Mishaleach and the Shaliach split that additional gift that is not directly related to the profit. And he says that that's the general rule that when a Shaliach is involved, we see from a number of examples in Shas, which are somewhat similar, not 100% similar, that they split the difference of the profit between them. And so the first example that we saw of that is, we'll just review this from Friday. Isa Birushalmi Trumos, Sa Truma Timeya Shel Kohen, Shanaflu Lameya Shel Chulin Shel Balabayas. Well, we know that if something that is contaminated and is tame falls into 100 measures of that same thing, it's batal. So you have one measure of tame truma that falls into 100 measures of chulin that is not tame, and that belongs to a regular non-kohen. Balabayas omer lo kohen, velo demei eitzim ani chayev lecha. So instead of previously having 100 measures of grain, the Balabayas, now have 101 measures of grain because of the Kohen's uh, uh, one, let's say, pound of grain that fell in. So the Kohen is saying, pay me for the fact that you now have 101 measures that you can sell instead of 100 measures. And the Balabaya says, what are you talking about? It was only worth a few pennies for you before it fell into my larger mixture. Because before you couldn't eat it because it was tame. It was tame truma. And you can't do anything with tame truma other than what? Other than burning it, using it for fuel. So therefore, if anything, I should only pay you a few pennies. Let's say it's 25 cents for the value of burning a pound of grain versus a buck for the value of a pound of grain that's consumable. So the question is, who's right? Ki truma tmei ruach rak l'streifa tul demei etzecha v'koin omer lo imatamocher es osasa shali la'acher. And the Cohen's argument, no, I've added $1 to the value of your entire amount of grain. You're going to be able to fetch $101 instead of just $100. So what's the psak over there? So the Gemara says, "Upaska haGemara delachein hakohen nosin lo demei eitzim, v'hashar yachloku beinehem." And I think that it may be a typo. I think it's the Balabayas should give the Kohen the value of the wood. In other words, the Balabayas gives the Kohen 25 cents, okay? And the rest they split between them. Whatever, and the 75 cents they would split between them. I think that this is a typo. Alma keven deharevach ba'al yedei hasa truma shel Kohen im hameya sa'in shel Balabayas Tolkien berevach b'shava. So what you see from here, from this Gemara, is that the profit that the principal received from this Kohen's truma falling into his chulin is split between the two parties. So again, it's similar to the case, not 100% analogous, but it's similar to the case of where a shaliach, a proxy, ends up getting more than what he was expected to receive. That is not, it's not directly related to the principal material of the deal, of the business affair, and that should be split between the two. Let's look at another case. Case number two. Od Isa B'Yerushalmi Sham, Echad Hipil Sa'orin L'toch Arema Shel Chitim, Sheshavim Yoser Misaorim. Similar scenario. A person accidentally or purposely, we don't know, poured into a trough that was filled with wheat. He pours in a bunch of barley. And so, but it's like a small percentage compared to the wheat. Now, which is more valuable, wheat or barley? Wheat is always, in the Talmudic period, wheat is always worth more than barley, a significant amount more than barley, because wheat was considered to be human consumption, and barley is like for either poor people or animals. Okay, and now the value, because there's added volume to this mixture of grain, he can sell it for more money, even more than if he had just barley alone. ולכן אותו אחד שהפיל מבקש מבעל החיטים שישלם לו על הסורים שלו כאילו הם חיטים. And therefore the guy who poured in his barley says, my barley fell into your mixture. Now you can sell this. Let's say it was previously, it was 50, it was 50 bushels of wheat. And now because 10 of my bushels of barley fell in, it won't be detectable as barley because it's such a small percentage of the whole mixture. You'll be able to sell this, instead of selling it for $50, you'll be able to sell it for $60. So give me $10. Okay, that's his argument. Okay, but if 10 bushels of barley would have sold on their own, you may have been able to get $6 or $7. So the dispute between them is, does the owner of the wheat owe him $10 because now he can sell it for 60 instead of 50, or does he only owe him the $6 or $7 worth of barley? Upasak Rabbi Yehuda Bar Shalom diiten lo demei saorim u'v'sha'ar harevach yachloka. So Rabbi Yehuda Bar Shalom in the Gemara there says that the owner of the wheat should pay him the $6 or $7 for the value of the barley, and the amount that he makes, let's say he makes an extra $4, gives him $6, he makes an extra $4 off of that bushel of barley, because right? So they split it, $2, $2. Okay, that's same case, similar case with the Kohen. Okay, does it make sense? In other words, he's building this case now. Splitting of the profit, splitting of the added value that this guy has brought to the deal. Okay. That's a good point. What if he says it actually reduces the value because most people want to buy pristine, pure wheat? So that's not the situation over here. Apparently, it's such a small amount. Maybe, well, I don't know if it's batal b'shishim, maybe not halachically batal, but the buyers don't really care for that small amount. Well, maybe they're not so sophisticated. I don't know. Okay, let's go to the next case. Isa b'bava mitzia. Shataf nahar zesa v'nasim l'soch sadeu shel chavera. A guy has a bunch of harvested olives, and he's trying to transport them down, and they spill into the river. I'm not sure exactly how. Maybe he was carrying a wheelbarrow, and it tipped into the river, and all of his olives get um, transported down the river and land into his friend's field. Okay, Ze Omer Artzi Godla, Ze Omer Zesi Godlo. So each one is saying that um, now it's not really clear what happens when the olives land in the field. I guess we should take a look at Safaria to see what they. I don't even understand what the Metzias is over there. So maybe it's the olive tree instead of just the olives itself. Let's take a look at the case over there of the Metzia, and it's what daf is it? Kuf Aleph Amid Aleph. The Mishnah teaches in the event that a river swept away one's olive trees, that's the case, and deposited them in the field of another, and they took root there and yielded olives. And then the olives are divided between the owner of the trees and the owner of the field. Okay, that's what the Mishnah teaches. Okay, so that's the case that he's addressing. So sorry, so it's Shotav Nahar Zesav. Doesn't mean his olives, it means his olive trees. They wash down the river, they take root in the friend's field, and they continue growing olives. Okay, so the guy who owns the field downriver says, my land was the thing that caused these olives to grow, and therefore they belong to me. And the other fellow whose trees got tossed downriver says, it's my olive trees that grew these olives. So the Gemara says, Yachloku. They should split the profits of the olives. Masika ha-Gemara ki asa rabin amaresh lakish lo shanu el shenekru bigushehan ubesoch shaloshanim da'az cholkin. He says that's only true if the trees were uprooted together with the earth surrounding the roots, and they grow within 3 years of being transplanted. So that's the next piece of the Gemara. They taught this only about a case where the olive trees were uprooted and relocated together with their clods of earth in which they grew. And the ruling is with regard to olives that grew after 3 years, since the trees took root in the new field. After 3 years, there's no longer any prohibition of orla on the olives, even if one presumes that the olives were nourished from the field owner's land. So it's only olives that grew after 3 years, because when a tree gets uprooted and it gets replanted, within the first 3 years, you can't benefit from the olives because they're orla. Even if you transplant a tree, you have to wait 3 years. Got to wait 3 years. Yeah. Yeah.
But it was the fruit itself, not the actual tree.
No, it has to do from the planting of the tree. Yeah. Yeah. So he says, Aval, I'm sorry, there must be a girsa change in this Gemara. Okay, sorry. The Gemara modifies its understanding. The Gemara suggests another interpretation. Rather, when Ravin came from Eretz Yisrael to Bavel, he said in the name of Reish Lakish, they taught this only about a case where the olive trees were uprooted and relocated together with their clods of earth in which they grew. And the ruling is with regard to olives that grew during the first 3 years, since the trees took root in the new field. But after the first 3 years, everything that grows is the property of the owner of the land, as he can say to the owner of the trees, if I had uprooted your trees from my field and instead planted my own trees, then after 3 years, could I not have consumed all of the olives produced by them? Okay, so the Gemara asks, but let the owner of the tree say to him, even if you had planted trees yourself at the time my trees took root in your field, then during the first 3 years you would not have consumed the fruit at all because of Orla. How can you come now and claim you are entitled to consume half of the olives together with me during those first 3 years? And apparently the reason why they're allowed to consume the produce during the first 3 years is because there's clumps of earth that are attached to the roots. You're not really exposing the roots and replanting them. It's that the earth itself is going along. Yeah. So therefore, apparently it's not Orla. Okay. So, well, it is if you uproot trees without their earth and then you replant them, so then the laws of Orla do apply. But apparently these were uprooted together with huge amounts of earth, and therefore the laws of Orla don't apply. Yeah. That's generally the halacha. The halacha is that if you replant something from a pot and you put it into the ground, you have to wait another 3 years from the time that you plant it. Yeah. Where the earth is going together with the thing. But anyway, so that's so Rav Shirag is just telling us the maskana of the Gemara that avola'achar shaloshanim kol hazesim lebal hakarka. But after 3 years, the olives belong to the guy who owns the field. Ki hu yachol omer lo im hayisi noteya ba'atzmi hayakulu magia li la'achar shaloshanim shavru shanos orla. Because the guy basically says, had I planted my own olive trees, I could have, kept all of it because it's no longer orla if I had just planted my own trees. The fact that your trees landed on my property and therefore took the nutrients from, helped, I guess, in addition to the earth that it was accompanied with, took nutrients from my soil, took up the space, didn't precluded me, let's say, from planting my own olive trees. Therefore, I'm entitled to half of the compensation during the first 3 years. Hare behedje de betoch shaloshanim yachloku, v'chein pasku harambam ve'ashulchan aruch b'zeh loshona. V'im akran hanohar begushehen yachloku haperos baal hasada im baal hazesim kol shaloshanim, ula'achar shaloshanim hakol lebal hasada. That's exactly how the Rambam and the Shulchan Aruch paskin, that during the first 3 years of the transplantation, they split the profits of the olives. After the first 3 years, the olive trees, or the new olives that grow, belong to the guy who owns the field. So based on that psak, the argument that the Chida makes is he talks about another case. Reuven has a chicken, okay? Hoshiv es atarnagola shalo imasara beitzim shalo shetase efrochem. So he set up his hen together with 10 eggs, sitting on the eggs in anticipation it's going to hatch chicks, and he'll be able to have a chicken farm. Uba Shimon vahosiv chamesh beitzim v'gadol lios efrochem. Shimon went ahead and took another 5 of his own eggs, put them under the hen, in the hopes that Reuven's hen would hatch those 5 eggs. Reuven wrote Salases l'Shimon rak chamesh beitzim v'lo esaf rochim shegadlu. Now, Shimon says, "Pay me for my added for the." No, Shimon says, "I put in 5 eggs, so they were hatched. They grew into full-blown chickens, or at least young chickens. Pay me for those young chickens." And Reuven says, "I'll pay you for the eggs. I'm not going to pay you for the chicks that hatched, because the chicks are worth much more than just the eggs." So who's right? Does Shimon get the payment for the chicks that hatched, or does he only get paid for 5 eggs? So the harab chida kasav the bal habeitzim zacha be'efrochem mitayme dezenene v'ze'ino chaser. So the chida initially wants to say that Shimon should get paid for the 5 chicks, because Reuben's going to be able to sell these chicks at market, let's say for $5 each, where an egg would only sell for $1 a piece, okay, or whatever. I'm just making up amounts, okay. The davka bezeisim cholkim ki bal hakarka mafsid chelak mikarko shalav ha'etz godel v'lachein cholkim. He says only in the case of the olive trees does the owner of the field not have the right to all of the olives for the first 3 years, because he could say, it's because of your olive trees that I can't plant my own olive trees. And therefore, I'm entitled to some kind of compensation for the fact that I'm letting your olive trees grow on my property instead of planting my own. But in the case of eggs that Shimon put there, okay, so I guess the argument is that that Reuven is not losing out at all. it's one thing like where he's comparing Ruvain to the owner of the field. Like just like your trees are deposited on my land, your eggs were deposited, Shimon's eggs were deposited under Ruvain's hen. But in the case of the trees, the owner of the field is losing the opportunity to plant his own olive trees. But in the case of the hen, Reuben's not losing anything. So therefore, the Chida argues that he should pay the full value of those hatched chicks that Shimon placed under the hen. Hakol magia lebal habeitzim. And therefore, he's getting pure profit. Well, because Reuben's taking the chicks to market and he's selling them, and he only wants to pay Shimon the value of the eggs. So he's taking them to market, he's selling them. He figures he'll make a handsome profit, and Shimon says, "Pay me for the 5 chicks that you sold." Amnam b'sefer dvar hamishpat kasav al zeh va'achar hamachila rabba ana bria kala nira libara de labala tarnagolis the yachanu b'chasero shal yedezen necheshes b'yeser seis latarnagolis. That another sefer, the sefer called Dvar HaMishpat, disagrees with the Chida and asks forgiveness, but he says, I have to disagree with the holy Chida. He says, because the fact is, the more eggs you put under a hen, the more the hens has to, I guess, exert itself to sit on those eggs and make sure they hatch. And he says, therefore, that in that case as well, they split the profit. In other words, one person who brings more value to the table versus the other person who, because of that, is the owner of the table. In other words, is the one who is the cause of the profit.
Yep. Excuse me, yeah, but there's another factor too, that a fertilized egg is worth more than a regular egg.
That fertilized egg is worth more than a regular egg.
Yeah, you have breeders that breed, that breed, let's say, turkey eggs that are fertilized, and then you take them and...
Okay, here comes Farmer Izzy.
I used to inseminate turkeys when I was in university.
That's... Not personally.
I know. It was on my resume.
Tell us how.
Right.
Oh yeah, it's very interesting.
Okay.
In any event, so they raise these birds to lay these eggs, and then they sell them to the hatchery. So those eggs are worth more than a regular turkey egg that you would sell, let's say, to a bakery or.
What? You mean because the nature of the yolk is a better quality yolk or something?
No, because it's fertilized. They sell it to the hatchery.
Oh, okay.
And then the hatchery hatches the baby turkeys, and they sell them.
Yeah.
Chicks.
Well, I mean, it's similar. It's similar to the argument. In other words, once what we're saying even more, not only is there a difference in value between fertilized and unfertilized eggs, there's a difference between an egg and a chick.
And a chick.
Yeah,
absolutely.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you for that, Izzy. Okay. Next case. Isa ben Adorim, Rav Gamda nasan arba azuzim lasafanim sheiknu lo schor. There's a Gemara in Adorim that says that Rav Gamda gave 4 zuz to these sailors, I guess guys operating a ship, that he said, you guys are going to Singapore, go buy me some merchandise when you get there. Lo matzu maliknos lo v'lochein kanu lo kof. They didn't find any merchandise, but they picked up a monkey for him. Figure, might as well get him something from Singapore. So, okay. Acharei zeh hakof borach lahem v'nichnas letoch chur echad. But the monkey ran away and hid in a certain hole. So chafru acharav matzu oso rovetz al margolios. Ve'hiviu kol hamargolios l'Rav Gamda. So they ran after the monkey, and they found that the monkey was playing or sitting on a bunch of diamonds, or pearls, margolios or pearls. And so they brought the pearls to Rav Gamda. And basically, he had a huge profit from the fact that they bought him a monkey. The kasvu harash v'haran sham da'asu kain min midas chasidus. Now that's the story, because a great tzaddik like Rav Gamda was zocha to make such a profit because of just because he was righteous. But the Rosh and the Ran write that these seafarers were really not obligated to give him all of those pearls. Because of this, even though the monkey that belonged to Rav Gamda found the pearls. Because of the Sefer Marcheshes, the Kavanasam Lomar, the Min Hadin Hayutzrichem Lachlok Chatzi Chatzi, that really the halacha would dictate that they should have split the pearls 50-50. Ki al yedei hakov shel Rav Gamda matzvus amargolios. Because on the one hand, Rav Gamda is zoiche because it was through his monkey that they found the pearls. V'asu chasidus vevilos kol amargolios ki hasafanim ruban chasidim. But the seafarers were mostly righteous people. Now, why does that? It sounds like that, generally speaking, sea travelers are righteous people. I guess they never heard of pirates back then. But they brought him the. So what does the footnote say? What does that mean?
In God, because
Izzy's right, because they believe in God. So he's quoting the Gemara in Kiddushin, right? Rabbi Yehuda Omer Mishmo HaChamorin Ruban Rishayin, that donkey drivers mostly are evil. The Hagamolin Ruban Ksherim, camel drivers are mostly kosher, and Hasafanim Ruban Chasidim, and seafarers or guys who operate ships are mostly pious. Pirish Rashi Hagamolim Ruban Ksherim. Why is it? Rashi explains why is it that most camel drivers are kosher people? Because they go out into the desert, and it's a dangerous place. There are wild animals, there are highwaymen, and they're worried about their lives, so they supplicate themselves before God. And the reason why seafarers are even more pious than that is because they go to a really dangerous place. They're constantly in fear. And so, like Izzy said, that's the reason why they're mostly pious. And that's the reason why they gave Rav Gamda the pearls. They figured if we act very, very righteously, we'll be protected by by Poseidon or whatever they believe in. Okay. All right. So let's go on to the next case. V'chein isa b'ksuvis. So again, another example of where they split the profits when good things come because of joint efforts. Okay. Do you want me to tell you how many cases? I'll tell you how many cases. I don't know. I'm enjoying this. I like the story about the monkey, and now I learned about inseminated turkey eggs also. Okay. All right. B'chein isa b'ksuvis Amar Shmuel. We have, I think, just one more. This is the last. V'chein isa b'ksuvis Amar Shmuel Shnaim shehitilu lekiz zeh mana v'zeh masayim v'hervichu. The Gemara in Ksubis gives a case that's brought by Shmuel. Two people pool their money together. Okay, one person puts in 100, the other one puts in 200 into a pot, and they go ahead and take this 300 zuz and they invest it and they make profit. Aschar la'emtza dahainu chatzi chatzi. So Shmuel says they split the profits. The principal that they get back from the 300 has to be divided 100 and 200. But let's say they end up doubling their money. So they started with 300, now they're up to 600. So the two partners, the guy, Ruvain is the guy who invested 100, Shimon invested 200. So Reuven gets his principal back, the 100, Shimon gets his 200, and then the other 300, they split 150 and 150. So that's the way Shmuel learns. Rav Hamnuna Omar Shafilu Shor Lacharisha V'Omer L'Tzvicha Aschar Le'emtza. And Rav Hamnuna says that even an ox that they use for plowing, even though it was meant to be butchered, I think that's the case over there, but instead they plow with the animal. and they make a profit from it, they split the profits. V'chein pasku harif v'harasham v'harambam v'chein nifsek b'shulchan aruch shekol kin shava b'shava. V'hizber hashita mekubetzes the mazel de beitrei adif v'lochein yachloku shava b'shava. Shita mekubetzes explains that this has to do with the fact that when you pool your efforts together, the individual mazel of each person is less powerful than the joint mazel of the two of them together. And that's why sometimes going into partnership with someone be a very successful endeavor.
The whole is worth more than the sum of the parts.
The whole is worth more than the sum of the parts. Exactly. Presumably so. Presumably
I
so.
think so. You're gonna give him, you're gonna split the profit,
Yeah.
now
Whatever.
you lose it.
Yeah. I'm not sure.
People say,
I'm not sure. All right, we'll hold it here for today because
Thank
we've already passed the time, and then we'll just finish the tshuva, God willing, tomorrow. Okay.
Shavua Tov.